Good evening, friends. We are starting the virtual nature tour Kharghar Valley again because there has been disconnection at our end, and so we are starting it again. So, in case you have missed, you can always see the recording. So, we are conducting the virtual walk again. So, if you are possible, try to join in. Otherwise, you can see it whenever you have time. Thank you. So this virtual nature trail concept, we have just, it's a new concept for us. And we thought that let us explore this because we are used to conducting all actual nature trails. And this is like, given the current times, we felt that we can plan a virtual tour also. So let's see how the virtual tour is and whether you enjoy it or not. So let's get started. So the virtual tour includes an overview of the Kharghar Valley, and since this is a summertime, so we are going to talk about more of summer flora and fauna that one can see on this trail. Also, the habitat restoration works which we had initiated last year. So even those a bit about that also I'll be talking about. Yeah. So let's get started. So where exactly Kharghar Valley is? So Kharghar Valley is in Navi Mumbai, and in Navi Mumbai there is an entire hill range, which is a continuous hill range, right from starting from Belapur. So we this one hill range which passes through has small hillock. Few hilly areas are there, and which is very accessible. So that is where the trail is there, and let me show you the topography of this place. So the topography is a completely hilly terrain, but the hill is not very steep. They are very small slopes one can actually climb and walk through. And this is the trail, the trail which we are going to take today. And on the right hand side, you see the cart path is basically the golf course. So the golf course ends and the trail starts. So and we discovered this trail somewhere like long ago because I used to go there for my morning walks, and I felt that I felt that this could be a good place for nature trails, and we started conducting nature trails. But it was not till Hindustan Times actually published about this trail in their place when they were looking for new locations, and I recommended Kharghar Valley, and that's how. So I would say officially in 2016 it got to become popular, and thereafter we found that there were many other groups who started conducting nature trails. But this place probably in our circle it is known for nature trails, but otherwise largely people come here for the monsoon fun because there is a good number of streams and waterfalls. In fact, there is one major waterfall which attracts large number of people, not only from Mumbai, Navi Mumbai, even from outside Mumbai. People have been coming here. Yeah, but this place is well protected by the local citizen group who go there for regular walks. Like I'm one of them, and it is only during my walk I explored the biodiversity of this place, which I'm going to share with you today. So let's get started. And this is our summer sojourn for Kharghar Valley. Let's explore the summer flora and fauna of this place. So when you land at the end of the tar road, when you come, this is the junction where you actually start from, and you can see it's completely dry and withered. Even the hill range you see it is largely withered because this has been not a protected. This is not really largely protected area. So people have been coming, taking cars inside, and there's absolutely no management, and therefore we felt that we as a citizens we should do something to this place, and therefore we took up the restoration work. And we were as I mentioned earlier, we conduct various walks over here. So summer walks were also interesting, and you will be surprised at what all things you can see in a summer. So the moment you enter, so as we enter this path, just on the left hand side rock, we come across this garden lizard. I have put an arrow especially because the garden lizard is so well camouflaged that one can really see, especially people who are not from this our background, so they will not really know what I'm trying to show them. So therefore, I put this arrow, And so garden lizards are this lizard, they're excellent pest controller. They eat good number of insects. Yeah, so if they are there in your garden, they give a very good service of pest control. I know that many people don't like lizards, but the choice is that whether you want to use a pesticide or whether you use a lizard. Yeah, it's your own choice. Yeah, so garden lizards are mostly so the territory, like the males usually, if this male is sitting on this rock, the other male will not come on this rock, the other male will be guarding another rock. So they'll almost like the rock is their territory. And the if you're not able to see very clearly in this picture, but there is a crest which the male is having. The females don't have that developed crest. In fact, the males develop breeding colors also when they, during the breeding season, and they lay eggs the female lay eggs by making a hole in the ground, and that's where she lays eggs and she just buries them. Let's move further, and then here we hear a bird call, and this bird call is of Indian robin. Indian robin also prefers, like in this area, that there's this partly grassy area, partly grassy and partly wooded area. So robins also prefer that kind of open area, and we always see them perched on a rock and giving a call. Mostly males who sit and give the calls. You can see the male on the right hand side and the female below. So the dull colored one is a female. And so female, so in nature, female has been always a protected species of the species, because she's the one who has to tend for the babies, and therefore, and she lives longer also. So most of the females are camouflaged in most of the bird females are mostly camouflaged. They have camouflage color. So that's a Indian robin, and they really sing very well. It's a very pleasant call they give out. Then let's move further. So there is so from here our pathway. There's a small path we took, and then from here the path bifurcates. One goes to the left, one goes to the right. The left hand one is a shorter one. So let us go on the shorter trail first, and then let's see if we can see something. And once we are done on this side, we'll go the other side, which is the longer route of it. So I'm sharing some pictures on the left hand side. Pictures which I'm sharing in most of my slides here are the actual pictures from the site, and the right hand side pictures I'm using as a reference pictures for you, so that you get an idea that how this plant would look like if it is in full bloom. So what you're looking at is a dry fruit of a common mallow plant. A common mallow is a relative of ladyfingers, the vegetable which we eat. The same, only that the fruit is very small. It's not longish like ladyfingers or okra, what they call nowadays. But they all belong to this one group of hibiscus family. So you can see the flowers look very much like this. So the fruit has been opened up and the seeds have been dispersed. The plant is just waiting for the monsoon. It is a perennial. It will grow again. It's a perennial shrub. It will grow again. Now, right now, it appears all dead, but it will grow new leaves and flowers will start coming when the rains come. And during the rains, when it is blooming, there's an insect that feeds on the flowers. It's called blister beetle. It's just fond of the tender leaves or tender petals of the this common mallow, and it is very common sight to see the blister beetle flying around. The blister beetle gets its name because if this blister beetle comes in contact with your skin, so the oil which is present on the body of the beetle can actually cause blistering, and therefore it is called blister beetle. Yeah. So let's move further, and here as we go further, we still find another dry fruit. So when you're in a forest like this, where everything looks dull and drab and there is no action happening, plants are very interesting subjects to study. Though they are ignored, one will only look for like some action to happen. But plants also have so much of stories. So we are going to cover both of them, the plant world as well as the animal world. So here you can see the dry brown color fruit kind of structure, which is having some cotton if you're able to see it. And also there's a green color or a fresh fruit also not ripened on the right hand side where I have put the arrows. I have put two arrows. One is on the ripened and opened fruit, and one which is not unopened fruit. The interest for this, I have a special interest for this plant because this is a butterfly plant. If we have this plant, Then a blue tiger butterfly will come and lay its eggs. So you can see the blue tiger butterfly I have shown below. So that butterfly will come. And in monsoon, this entire climber actually transformed. So it is still alive. It is not dead. It's again a perennial climber. So it just transforms itself, and you can look at the green color flowers which grow in clusters, and later on this horn-like fruits which it has got. And this fruit is packed with seeds which are having cottony covering around them. And this cotton cover always helps the seeds to fly with the wind and settle and grow into a new plant. So that's what we found on the small trail which we took on the left hand side. Now probably we can also start going the other side. So here I would like to tell you that the volunteer work what we did. So we were very keen that we want to restore this place, but we also know that we also knew that we can't do it by ourselves. Yeah, and we wanted the local people who are benefiting from this place, who are coming for the morning walks or enjoying this place during the monsoon time, to contribute someday. So we started this movement of campaign, volunteering campaign along the a volunteering campaign along for the Khargar Valley, and we really got a very good response. And we started with a small number of volunteers. I would say 7 to 8 volunteers had signed up initially, and slowly this started, increasing. And finally, we reached to, like, within a month or two, we reached to a capacity of 70 volunteers, all from locally from Mumbai, Navi Mumbai, as well as from Mumbai. Yeah, so we started mobilizing because we were keen to take this up seriously. And here you can see the first interaction with our volunteers who are actually coming with us on the field surveys what we were carrying out. And the first activity, we thought that we were actually, this was like what a coincidence it is. Like, today is the International Day for Biological Diversity, and exactly on the same day today, last year, we carried out the biodiversity survey of this area. And this all the sightings which we made that day is what I'm going to share with you. So it is really very nostalgic for me, because this is my favorite place, and I've been going there very so often. But for last couple months, we are just stuck at homes, and so it is a good journey for me also. So we engaged our volunteers to do a biodiversity survey. We taught them how to do the biodiversity survey, and here are the people who are actually helping us. So while we were doing this biodiversity survey, so that's where we on the ground. So there were teams who were working. So there was one team who was looking at plants. There was one team who was looking at the ground for insects. One team something flying for birds, and that's how we are divided. And that's how whenever they found something, we used to go and help and identify, and that's how they were recording. So this is where we trained them how to collect the information. So we came across this red cotton bug. I'm sure you would have also seen it. This is a common insect seen just before rains. And they are seen just before rains because that's the time most of the trees which are having silky seeds with cotton, they are dispersed in just before the rains. And those are the seeds what these bugs feed on. So bugs have a mouth pad that is piercing and sucking. That is like a syringe. They can put their mouth pad into something and just suck up the juices. So they take the seed oil. They feed on the seed oil on most of the cotton-related plants. So it could be the actual cotton. So it is actually pressed on actual cotton. And then there is also this even the in wild. I just showed you few plants. The green milkweed climber, who is having cotton inside, so they feed on that seeds also. And here it is also feeding on a giant milkweed pod, the red cotton bug. So when you see these red cotton bugs, they come in large numbers, and one really gets surprised at from where they have emerged. So the guess is that like the mostly probably the eggs are actually dormant, and they just hatch out just before the rains. And that's where you see a large population of the species. And I think even the adult might be hibernating, and therefore you see some adults. So of course this kind of studies, more studies in the wild is needed. And here you can see on the right hand side the mix of bugs are there. So some bugs are having the entire wing, which is having the black patch complete, and in other it is only black spots. Two black spots are there. So all those who are having two black spots are the juveniles. They have not developed the wings completely. And that is where we heard at white-throated kingfisher. White-throated kingfisher has a it's a loud, shrill sound, and that's how you can always you can't mistake it. So they, they are usually seen. We have seen in the rocky patches where there is one or two trees are there. They usually come in that rocky gaps, and they are usually perching on an open branch, and because that gives them strategic location to have an overview of the place. So if there is some snake moving on, some lizard moving on, so they can have that view and they can go and catch, because as the name says, kingfisher, it is not purely a fish eating bird. This eats a good amount of other animals also. And they make nest like this on the sides of the banks of the mud banks. So in the forest, on the slopes, they make holes like this and they lay eggs inside. And as I said, that we started with volunteering activity, and so first we did the biodiversity survey. Then we said, okay, let us start doing something else. So since the monsoon was to come, so we said, let's collect the forest seeds. So whatever seeds were dried up, fallen on the ground, we started collecting them. Nearly we had 10 to 12 species of shrubs and tree species seeds we collected, and we got these volunteers who helped us in collecting the seeds. We got another batch of volunteers who came to our office and they made a seed ball of these seeds. Yeah, we were trying this for first time. We didn't know whether this would be successful or not, and mostly seed balls are made and thrown, and we were very sure that we are not going to throw the seed balls, we are going to plant them. Yeah, so the volunteers came forward and they helped us, and we stored these seed balls and waiting for the rains to come. And that is where, when still while we are doing the seed collection drive, we come across this a small gap in the crevices in the ground, the left hand side picture I'm talking about. And there is all this ants coming out of it. So, and the you see the husk around this crevices, all this dry husk around that crevice shows that it is not just any ant nest, but it is a harvester ant hill. And harvester ant hill has too many unique things to sorry things to talk about. One is they make this beautiful anthill. You can see the on the right hand side. I've shown the picture. They make a beautiful anthill like this, and they start making the anthill somewhere just before rains. They start making it, and in the rains, when the the mud is very soft, they start building it faster, and then remain like that. And the interesting part of their home is that we usually enter our buildings from the ground floor. Yeah, but these guys enter their building from the terrace. That's very interesting. So you can actually look up on Google and read more about it, because how much ever I love to talk about it, but if I can't go to in much details. Yeah, so harvester ant gets a name from the habit of harvesting seeds. So it collects the seeds from the forest, all workers going out collecting the seeds, bringing to the colony. Now the nest, the unique part of the nest is that whatever it is seen above, that is not the only part of the nest. The nest is maybe 2 or 3 meter deep also below. Yeah, so you can imagine that, I'm imagining that there, you can also imagine this, that there is a large dining table, and all these worker ants have brought the seeds from the forest. They all put just unload themselves on the center of the dining table. Yeah, and every the queen gives the order to all these workers that, okay, remove the seed coats. Yeah, now why remove the seed coats? Because if the seeds remain with the seed coat, there is a tendency of the seeds to germinate. So let's remove the seed coats. So the seed coats are removed, and I would say, just like human beings, throw the trash outside your home. Yeah. So someone just collects this all seed covers and just throws out of the home. And that is an indication also. If you find a pile of husk somewhere, if you look around, you might find a harvester anthill close by, or at least an opening. Yeah. Now, after removing the seed coat, what they do next is that this is a food for them. This is a food for summer. This is a food for winter. So this is a food, and how they store the food. They don't store the food as a seed. They will chew the food into something like a bread kind of material. So everybody has been instructed to chew the seed to make a bread, but not eat it. Yeah, and this bread is then stored, and in the times when there is no food available, the colony feeds on this bread. But some amount of the bread is kept aside to grow fungus garden. So I always say that insects were the first to start farming. We were not the first. Why? Because they exactly knew how to grow a fungus garden. They used to bring fungus spores, planted on the bread, allow the fungus to grow, and the fungus would release some vitamins or some nutrients to the bread. It becomes like a vitamin supplement for them. So that special bread is eaten as a vitamin supplement. Isn't that amazing? Yeah. Another interesting part of the harvester ant is that they were also the first insect to start animal husbandry, like tending cattle. And the cattle in this case is an aphid. An aphid is another insect which feeds on plant juices, and whenever it is tapped, it gives off a sugary solution. So ants know that the aphids have these capabilities. So what they do, they bring some aphids to their colony and tend them. Yeah, keep them keep them inside the colony and keep tapping for the sugary solution. So it is almost equivalent, like, tending a cow or milking a cow. So therefore, they are true farmers. So let's move on from harvester hand. So this was, so much action was happening on the ground. So let's move forward. And I told you that we were just taking a small trail on the left hand side, and there is another trail we have to go. And here is where, on the junction itself, when we are moving away from the trail, we find something, this white color thing hanging from the tree branch. I don't know if most of you have seen this. It does look like an egg-like thing, but it is actually the cocoon of a moth, tussor silk cocoon. This is a caterpillar who has made this, and this is a moth that has emerged, that will emerge from this cocoon. And they're usually hanging from a very, you can see the branch is completely girdled by a silk strand, and the silk strand is so tough. It is no, it is no lesser stronger than even a metal wire. Yeah, because it is very difficult to tear this thread which you see from which the cocoon is hanging. So it is that strong, and this entire ball kind of thing what you're seeing is being created with help of almost more than 1 kilometer long silk thread which was secreted by this caterpillar. So the caterpillar literally caged itself inside the silk, and that's how the cocoon was formed. And in fact, the cocoon formation takes almost 1 week. There are so many layers of silk it keeps on adding. Yeah, and when in sericulture, in because tussor silk is used in tussor silk is one of the sericulture of material. So they kill the moth. So they have to kill the cocoon, because when the moth is about to emerge, it secretes a chemical that can dissolve the strands, and the moth will emerge. They didn't want, they don't, so sericulturists don't want that entire, they want the entire thread. They don't want the thread to be broken into pieces. So therefore they don't allow the moth to come. They killed it, and so that the thread could be taken out. So so if you are a nature lover, you should be not wearing any tussor silk clothing. Okay, so tussor silk also is a city moth. I forgot to mention it because it feeds on Ziziphus, that is a bare plant, which is a common tree growing wild in any city. So we are on another track of the trail now. You can see behind this group, there is a smaller track which we took, and on the left hand side, you can see the pathway, the tar road, which is adjoining the golf course, and we just intersected that part, and we are on this side. And you can see the terrain. It's completely rocky, completely dry, just few green patches here and there. Let's see if we can find something more. And we did. So this is the giant milkweed, which is flowering right now. And you look at the flowers are very unique because it's a completely closed flower. It's like closed for everyone except for one, So the carpenter bee is the pollinator of this flower. So the carpenter bee manages to open this flower and take the nectar, and that is where the carpenter becomes the pollinator because it carries the pollen also. The pollen are also hidden inside this flower. It's only one who can open the flower can get the pollen also. So it's a very specialized flower for a plant which is growing so wild along the roadside. Nobody bothers to look at it, but it's a very special plant. But it's a completely it's a laden with poison because it has a white latex which is having hat poisons in it, and therefore not many animals or no cattle actually feeds on it, except I said the plain tiger caterpillar has taken up the challenge that okay, let me digest this poison. So what the plain tiger caterpillar does, it makes such small trenches. Can you see on the picture? The small holes it has created on the leaf, and it starts eating the. So it creates this hole, and that injury area, all the latex which is actually drained off, and then whatever latex is remaining in the remaining in the leaf area is very small amount, so the caterpillar can digest that kind of poison. So caterpillar has been storing poison in its body right from the childhood, and then the adult butterfly also becomes a poisoner. So the tiger butterfly is a poisonous. Birds don't eat them, the caterpillars are not eaten because the plant poison is being stored inside the body of the caterpillar. And I'm also showing the fruit, when it is fruiting, the how the fruit will look, and inside the fruit what is there. You see the center picture, the brown color thing, they're neatly laid, they are piled. They're the seeds, and they each seed has a silk filaments. You can see the silk threads around it, so that silk helps the seed to fly and settle and grow into a new plant. So that's a giant milkweed. We are now going forward on the trail, and this trail is actually, the pathway is long, and we are just going to be, we just go to the end of this trail. That's where the pathway ends, because then the forest, the hilly area starts, so we can't really go there. So we'll go throughout this trail, and you can see the habitat, how the habitat has changed. It has become more steeper, the hill range is coming closer, you're going very, very close. It's completely rocky, all the rock and all is all exposed. So you can also say that this place is suffering from heavy soil erosion, as a soil is actually gets washed away every monsoon on the roads. Yeah, and so that was our major concern, because it's literally that this place was crumbling down with every rain. More and more rocks were getting exposed, and that's where we felt that we should be doing something. And this is a small this is an area where there's a waterfall which actually comes down. So we are actually closer to a dry stream now, and along the dry streams there are few trees. That's where most of the bird activity is also seen. And we see this jungle babbler. The uniqueness of jungle babbler is that they are always in a group of 7, around 5 to 7 maybe, I would say, or 7 to 8. Yeah. So they are always like social insects, and they really chatter a lot. They can be really very noisy. Yeah, but a typical forest bird, and it is a fun to watch them, because if you see one jungle babbler coming and settling on a branch, be patient, other 6 will join them soon. Yeah. So I'm just showing some reference pictures below, that how the jungle babblers breed. So that is a nest of the jungle babbler. They make a cup-shaped kind of nest in a tree fork, and the eggs are beautifully blue color. It's very unique color, and the chicks are. You can see the chicks also. In fact, nest photography is banned as far as wildlife photography is concerned, because to take a picture like this, you can imagine the photographer has gone so close, and anybody who goes so close to a nest actually threatens the bird, as well as gets the attention. The predators get to know that there is something over there, and that's how. Especially crows are very smarter. They know that if people have stopped and looking at something, so that the crow will also look where you're looking at. So it's advised not to take pictures of bird nest. And on this path, there are not very many trees. So because most of the trees are there, but they are very dry. And the only tree that I come across is this, soccer ball tree. It is called soccer ball because it has a fruit that is a soccer ball like. Okay, you can look at the fruit, which I've shared on the right hand side. And this fruit is a combination of nearly 12 to 14 flowers. Like when 12 to 14 flowers bloom, and when they fall off, the basis of the flower, which is also called ovary, so they all fuse to form one fruit. So it is a composite fruit. So it is not one plant which is going to come out, but there can be multiple then there are multiple plants that can come out from it. So it's a multiple fruit, very unique, but it is very bitter in taste, and it is not meant for consumption. And the flowers are very fragrant, just like jasmine. The another interesting part about the soccer ball tree is its bark. I'm not showing the picture over here, but the bark is like a crocodile back, like a crocodile back cracked. That's one of the ways of identifying this tree. And this tree is also a host plant for hummingbird hawkmoth. Hummingbird hawkmoth is very much like when it hovers in front of flower, it looks like a hummingbird, but we don't have any hummingbird in our country. We just have hummingbird hawkmoths, and they're very tiny moths, and they get the name because they hover in front of the flower, and they have a long tube to take nectar from. So the caterpillars could be seen feeding on the leaves of the soccer ball tree. So whenever you are actually trees should be studied not only from the botanical perspective but also the ecological perspective. What is the role the tree is playing? Who is depending on the tree? All those features actually make a tree very interesting. There's a woody climber which is usually seen in forested areas, and here also we can see not many of them are there, but they are there at the adjoining wherever the foothills of the hill range is there we get to see. And they usually grow on trees, like grow in the sense they climb over the trees and they just cover up the whole tree. So right now in the summertime, you don't get to see the entire plant in bloom or something, but whatever bloom was there of previous year, you see the dry flowers all fallen here and there. And when the flowers are about to fall, this is the color you see them. And flowers so if you see that the flower and the fruit, they almost look same. So I'm showing the lower pictures of fruit. So the fruit is also brown in color here also. So flower and fruit are so looking alike, it becomes sometimes very difficult to tell what is flower, what is fruit. But when the flower is blooming, it is green in color. You can see the middle picture. And when the tree is covering up, when the climber covers up any of the tree on which it is climbing, this is how it looks. The original tree is rarely seen. So that's a paper flower because it has the feeling of paper flower. Yeah, no, we got, and then we got to see our first butterfly. This is like a first butterfly on our trail. We didn't see any butterfly so far, and this is the first butterfly. This is a common rose. I've shown you one more butterfly picture. There's a common rose here, and there's another butterfly over here, which looks like common rose but not a common rose. It is called common mormon, and that's a female butterfly who is trying to copy the color combination of this butterfly. The reason is this butterfly is poisonous. Why? Because the caterpillar, see the red color caterpillar on the top? The caterpillar feeds on the poisonous plant. The poison is stored in the caterpillar, so the caterpillar is protected. Poison is passed on to the butterfly, so the butterfly is protected. The common mormon knows that the common rose is distasteful, birds don't peck on them. So why not copy so that I am also protected? So this is a mimicry. This is a mimicry what happens in butterfly world, and only females are given the privilege of copying poisonous species. So that's a common mormon. The differentiation, if you want to identify whether you're looking at a common mormon or common rose, you can look for the red body. The body is always red of common rose, and the common mormon has a black body. And the caterpillar is also very different looking, and it is like the caterpillar, since it is not poisonous, so it has to protect itself, so by remaining camouflage. The top one caterpillar, there is no need to protect itself because it is poisonous, so it is communicating. Look, I'm red in color, so you don't come closer to me. So anything pretty and beautiful is there in nature is actually a sign of danger. Yeah. And that's how the predators learn. So as I said, that we mobilized this volunteer force, and so the reason we wanted volunteers that we wanted to do a good amount of work. So we said, let's get started, And so we had plans of like we did the biodiversity survey, we did the seed collection. Then we said that let us work on the site. So there was this is a trail, the pathway which is completely worn out. We thought let us do some development of pathway development so that we can limit the disturbance to the pathway and the other areas are not getting affected. But before that, we thought that let us curb the soil erosion problem. And soil erosion problem could be curbed by having contour bunding. So contour bunding is nothing but creating small stone bridges in the slopy areas where the soil can flow down and get embedded in that bridge, so the soil is not washed away. So that's the contour bunding. So we started with our volunteers, and it is a completely physical work, yet so many people came, and rather I would say all age group people actually participate in this activity, and they really enjoyed in doing this activity for us. And we were like, this is like was every Sunday, Sunday activity, I think for 3 to 4 months. Every Sunday literally we met, and always a group of 10 to 15 people used to sign up for the volunteering activity, and we used to come and do a small job, like 2 hours, 2 hours, whatever work they can do, we used to finish that. So in a step by step manner, we actually started restoring many patches of the hilly area, whatever we were able to. So here you can see how all the small stony bridges created by the volunteers. And while we were and here you can see that how the land was, the below land, you can see the picture. It is a slopy area, which means in the rain, and it is a completely open area, which means in the rain the soil will just flow down. And now we created a small bund on that, so that whatever soil comes, it just gets held up in that stones and not go further. And that's when we came across this wild banana plant, which is sprouting. And it is still May, and we were wondering that why it is sprouting. So the banana plant sensed that the weather is changing and the rains are going to come soon. So this banana plant, which is usually dormant throughout the year, came to life and started growing new leaves. And I'm sharing some reference pictures on the left hand side to show that how a banana plant flower looks like, how the fruits look like. They almost look like our ordinary banana. The difference is that this banana is not edible for us, but it is certainly edible for animals such as bats. Bananas are pollinated by bats as well as bats love to eat the fruit eating. Bats are the one. They are the one who help in dispersal of the banana plants also. And in on the hill region, if you see banana, they are always growing, jutting out on the rocky cliff area. So that is a favorite part where the banana plants usually grow, and this is completely wild species. The importance of wild species, wild vegetables, wild fruit is that they are the hard disk of our of our in the food security. So anything goes wrong with our banana file, imagine, okay, you have a file that is generating bananas. Today we all are eating that, right? And something goes wrong, some infection comes, and that file gets corrupted. Where do we go? We have to go and copy the master file from the drive where you copied the main data is sitting. So forest is the hard disk of all the files that we are using today. So we should never risk the hard disk. We have to protect the hard disk. We take so many backups. Why? Because we want the data to be stored. We should give the same treatment to the natural world also. All the wild species which are there, they need protection because they are our food security is directly dependent on these wild species. Yeah. So this banana is the origin from where the bananas which we have eaten today has originated from this banana. And while we're still on the ground, we're looking, because most of the actions is happening on the ground during the summertime. Very less on the, except birds, not much you see on the treetops. But in the ground, on the ground level, you can see reptiles, you can see insects, a whole lot of action can happen. So here we came across this small lizard, I would say. It's not very big, but it was showing this white color fan below its neck. So it was opening up, closing, opening, closing. So it's called fan-throated lizard, and it is actually signaling or its mate for communicating with the mate, and also commanding an area which is actually it is its own territory. So it doesn't allow other males to come. So they usually perch themselves on a rock and they start doing this performance. And there are many other species which are having different colored fan. So this is multicolor fan is fan throat is also seen, but it's not seen here. We didn't come across this. I'm just showing this picture for you to see that if this lizard is threatened, the lizard tends to run on its hind legs, only 2 legs. It doesn't use 4 legs, and that actually got the name as bipedal lizard, the lizard who has 2 legs. Though it is in 4, but because it runs like just like humans, it can run like us, you know. So that's the uniqueness of fan-throated lizard. And fan-throated lizard habitat is all rocky surfaces, rocky plateaus, rocky area is where they are found. So a species which you find in a particular habitat also tells you about the habitat and also about the species. So if I have to look for a fan-throated lizard, I'll not go near a water body, or I'll not go in a deeply, densely jungle area, because these species need open area, open, dry, you know, so dry deciduous kind of habitat is needed for them. So understanding the species habitat requirement is also important, and that is what, when you start observing more about them, you understand them better. And then let's see who else you found. Yeah, and there is one more plant which is blooming right now, which is called firebush. You can see the orange color flowers on which the sunbird is feeding. So it is also growing on a rock cliffs. So on the rock cliff, you can just see not barely any leaves will be there. They're just orange color flowers, and they're beautiful, and therefore it's called firebush. They're really tiny flowers, tiny tubular flowers. But the sunbird's beak is adapted to take nectar from it. So you can see that you can put in the beak right inside, and the beak is curved. Sunbird beak is curved, and that is one of the ways of identifying sunbirds. If you find a bird which is having a long beak and slightly curved one, and smaller size bird, of course, not a bigger bird, then that is usually a sunbird. This bird which you are seeing, which is feeding on the flower, is an intermediate, which means that it is just a juvenile. It has not got its entire feathers of an adult. Look at the adult. The adult is really purple, glistening in the sun. That may be the reason it is called sunbird. And the female is dull colored, as I mentioned earlier. And look at the nest, the kind of nest they build. The nest is nothing but it is a forest trash put together and stitched with help of some thread, some row, some straws of grass, some silk from the cobwebs, and all put together. That becomes a nest. So it is very difficult to locate a sunbird nest. So sunbird are frugivorous. Frugivorous means, sorry, they are nectivorous. So they just they feed on the nectar of plants. So they're flower plants. So if you have shoe flower plants, or you have tecoma plants, so sunbirds are the ones who come for taking the nectar. They need tubular flowers. Let's see who else, what else has. So as I mentioned earlier, that we started doing some activities, and the other activity we took up with help of our volunteers on the same pathway. This is the same trail where we were just walking. This is the same trail. The volunteers started developing the pathway. You can see that they are digging the path and they are placing the stones, and the stones will ensure that the disturbance is only limited to the pathway and people don't venture out. And later on, they actually whitewashed also this pathway, the stones, so that there's a clear demarcation. So yes, it was a every Sunday activity, and I think this was the most laborious activity we did. It really took nearly 3 to 4 Sundays for us to cover the entire stretch, and we really got a very good number of volunteers who used to regularly sign up. Even they used to bring children along with them, because it was a good Sunday outing for all of them with the nature. It was tough job because working in the sun was difficult, yet these volunteers helped us. So we are really thankful that they believed in our cause and supported it. And as I said, that we were planning to plant the seed balls, and last year it happened that the rains were there was one shower which happened in May, and the soil was slightly wet, and we were wondering that whether we should wait for the monsoon to come or let us plant it right now. So we anyway took a decision of planting it. So we got again another batch of people who just came and planted the seed balls, because we didn't believe in throwing the seed balls, because seed ball throwing is, I feel, the opinion might differ. It is like a lazy man's approach. We are just throwing it and you don't know what happens to that seed, right? But at least if you plant and you know that nothing has grown, you know that it was not successful. So when you throw the seed balls, it's like throwing away a responsibility of growing a plant. So we didn't want to do that. We said let us plant it and see. So we planted it. Not there was, I must say that we didn't have much of success rate, because we couldn't really figure out when in the monsoon when the plant started growing, whether it was the one which we planted that has come, or it is naturally growing, because these are all wild species that we planted anyway. So the seed ball plantation happened. So the people, we did that, we completed that task, and thereafter, and that's when we actually came across, while we were just doing the digging, we found these holes in the ground, These are the holes one can see in the summertime in any ground in the forest track if you go, especially in the open areas. They'll even in shelter area also do, but I have seen mostly they make this holes in the open area. Probably the chances of an ant traveling in an open area is much higher than in a secular way. I don't know, but so these holes are made by an insect called antlion. The antlion larva, I would say. The larva picture I have put in the center as a reference picture for you. So the baby sits in the center and it is waiting for an ant. And if an ant comes by and falls, so it just throws more. It just throws more soil at it and make it slip. And once the ant comes to the center, this antlion larva will just hold it and sip the juice out of the ant and just throw the empty carcass. That is the style of feeding of antlion. And once it grows sufficiently big, it doesn't make this pit holes anymore. Then it becomes a hunter. Then it just moves and start catching and feeding, and then it pupates inside the ground in a mud ball. In a mud, it makes a cocoon, and from the cocoon, the adult emerges, cocoon or pupa, whatever. The adult emerges, and the adult looks like a dragonfly. The difference is that it has really a bit longer antennae than a dragonfly, and the wings are not horizontally, but vertically the wings are held. And they are very slow flyers, and they fly in the evening time. So once the antlion comes, the antlion is also a hunting animal, so it hunts in the evening time and feeds on small insects. Yeah, and this is probably our last tree which we came across, because this was the only tree which was profusely flowering, and it caught our attention because there were butterflies flying around them. You can see a couple of butterflies, wasps, bees, all actually get attracted. This is Pala indigo tree. Feature is its fruit. If you see the fruit, which I have shared the reference pictures is on the right hand side, the fruit is like two tubes together fixed at the one end, so they always fuse at the end, just like it just forms a ring. And they are medicinal. This is the medicinal properties. They have medicinal properties. They have been used in Ayurvedic medicines. And when the fruits ripe, so they open up, and they also are holding the seeds with the cotton. You can see the seeds which are put down, so they help in dispersing. The tree is a very good butterfly attractant tree in the forest. It's a completely wild species. It's not easy to get a sapling of this plant to grow in your garden, but it is a wild plant. And this is the interesting fruit that we came across. It's completely brown in color. You can see the first picture. So it is called Indian screw tree because it's a fruit that is completely twisted. And as the monsoon comes, it starts uncoiling itself. You can see the lower picture where the pod it starts uncoiling, and the seeds are dispersed. The seeds are dispersed in the monsoon time. So as of now, if you go, you will only see the brown color pod. But in the monsoon, the new pods look like green pods. You can see on the right hand side, and the flowers are very interesting because there are two color flowers you will get to see. One is a orange and one is a blue color. They are not two color flowers. They are actually, one is older and one is younger. So the orange flower is like, which has bloomed today. The blue flower bloomed yesterday. So it is an old flower. But it is also that it got pollinated. The blue flower is a pollinated one. The pollination happens by, like, pollination has been done by butterflies. And the pollination, after the pollination, the flower changes the color to communicate to the pollinator that, hey, don't waste your time on me, I'm done, you know. And then they can focus on the orange flowers. Strange, but I have also seen some butterflies actually still trying to feed on the blue flowers. So I don't know what it is, but usually flowers change color after pollination to communicate to the pollinator. This plant is a host plant for two. One is a moth and one is a butterfly. Butterfly picture I've shown, that is a golden angle butterfly. The caterpillar feeds on the leaves of the plant by curling up the leaf. It just folds the leaves and feeds inside, because most of the skipper butterflies, that's how they feed. And the Marumba hawkmoth caterpillar. You look at the caterpillar picture and you look at the fruit picture. They almost look similar, isn't it? Yeah. So the same stripes, the same pointed edges are there. So when I was doing my masters where I was studying the life histories of hawk moths of Sanjay National Park, invariably I used to come across this caterpillar and I used to think, oh, that's a fruit, but it is not a fruit, it is a caterpillar. So that's how nature has its own way of, like, insects have come up with different strategies of protecting themselves, so much so that they merge so well with their own surrounding that identifying them or pinpointing them becomes very difficult. So that's the Indian screw tree. It's a medicinal fruit used in children medicine. There's a small children medicine in Maharashtra, at least, used called as Balkadu. It has medicinal properties. It is used against stomach aches. Okay, so that was our last tree, and now we have come to an end of our trail. And these are the volunteers who have been with us on this journey. While you were involved with, you were part of it is virtually, but they have been part of this journey with us, and we really are thankful for them that we were able to do some restoration work. I won't say we did a great job over there, but some amount of work has been done, and a greater amount of awareness has been created because of this local volunteer work which we are doing. So we are hopeful that this monsoon things might be slightly different. We will go back if we are allowed to go and explore this. We want to see how the counter bunds are doing, how the pathways are doing, and whether the soil erosion has been arrested to some extent. So that's something journey will go on. Yeah, and if you liked my summer trail of Kharghar Valley, do sign up for my monsoon trail also. Most probably, I will do a virtual trail of monsoon season in June because we need to feel the ambience also. At least virtually, you can't really see things, but at least you should feel things. So we are waiting for the monsoon season. Okay, till then, thank you so much for joining. And if you have any questions, please drop your questions in the comment box, because once I close this screen sharing, the video will come to an end, but I'll certainly respond to your questions on the in the comment section. And friends, do write your feedback and do write a review for us. That will be very helpful. Thank you so much, and sorry for the glitches we had, technological glitches. Thanks a lot, and good night.